There's a kind of strength that rarely gets recognized. It's soft. It's quiet. It lives in the corners of tired eyes and practiced smiles. It's the strength of someone who says, "I'm okay," while their heart trembles under the weight of holding everything together. You've seen them, maybe you are them. The dependable ones. The helpers. The people who keep showing up even when they're unraveling inside. They don't want to burden anyone, so they become experts at pretending. Their mask looks effortless, calm, capable, composed, but beneath it lies exhaustion and a deep fear of being seen too closely. Psychologically, it's not deception. It's protection, the mind's way of keeping the heart safe when it believes vulnerability isn't allowed. It usually begins long before adulthood, somewhere in the quiet corners of childhood. That's where they first learned that feelings had consequences. Maybe when they cried, no one noticed. Maybe when they asked for help, they were told to toughen up. Maybe when they showed pain, someone mocked them, dismissed them, or compared their suffering to someone else's. So they adapted. They built a mask early, one that said, "I'm fine," even when they weren't. They discovered that silence was safer than honesty, that composure was rewarded while collapse was punished. Over time, pretending became survival, a way to protect relationships, jobs, reputations, even a fragile sense of self, and society applauded them for it. We call that strength, but we rarely ask what it costs, because every time someone swallows their truth to appear okay, they aren't just burying sadness, they're burying themselves. Fragment by fragment, they trade authenticity for acceptance. Psychologically, this pattern has a name: emotional suppression. It's one of the most common yet invisible coping mechanisms adults rely on. Research shows that people who chronically suppress their emotions often do so because somewhere along the way, they learned that vulnerability equals weakness. But here's the paradox: the more you suppress, the more disconnected you become, not just from others, but from yourself. It's a quiet loop powered by fear. Fear of being judged, fear of being rejected, fear of what might happen if the mask slips, even for a second. So they keep smiling, keep posting pictures that say "I'm fine," keep showing up, performing, holding everything together. They laugh at the right moments, give the right answers, live the script flawlessly, and sometimes they even convince themselves it's real. But beneath it all, there's a bone-deep exhaustion. Not the kind that rest cures, but the kind that comes from carrying a false version of yourself for far too long. There's a kind of quiet chaos that lives inside people who pretend to be fine. On the outside, they look steady, composed, kind, in control. But beneath that calm surface, there's a storm that never really rests. Their mind turns into a battlefield between authenticity and expectation, between who they truly are and who they believe they should be. You can spot them if you look closely. They're the ones who brush off compliments, who steer conversations away from vulnerability, who mask pain with a laugh and say things like, "I'm just tired," or "It's nothing, really." Psychologists call this emotional masking, the act of showing only the emotions that feel safe, while hiding the ones that don't. It's a defense mechanism, often born in childhood, in homes where feelings were met with silence, ridicule, or punishment. Over time, the mask fuses with the face. The performance becomes second nature, and one day, they don't even notice they're acting anymore because the pretending has become the person. What's often overlooked and deeply misunderstood is that these people aren't fragile. They're survivors. Every time they smile through the ache, they're doing what they've always done, using the emotional tools that once kept them safe in a world that didn't welcome honesty. They learned early that if they could stay calm, maybe the chaos around them would too. If they could appear okay, maybe everything wouldn't fall apart. But that kind of control carries a hidden cost. Suppression doesn't erase emotion, it only delays it, and the delay always comes with interest. Over time, the mind and body begin to revolt. Studies link chronic emotional suppression to heightened stress, weakened immunity, and symptoms of anxiety and depression. Because the truth is, those feelings don't vanish when ignored, they wait. They wait for the quiet moments, for the long drives home, for the nights when everything finally goes still. That's when the mask slips and everything buried comes rushing back, demanding to be felt. It's not rare for people who spend their lives pretending to be okay to develop what psychologists call emotional fatigue, a deep, chronic exhaustion that doesn't come from doing too much, but from feeling too little. It's the weight of constant maintenance, maintaining appearances, maintaining control, maintaining distance from the parts of yourself that hurt too much to touch. But here's the hopeful truth: pretending to be okay isn't permanent. It's not a flaw in your character. It's a defense mechanism, one that once kept you safe, but now keeps you stuck. And like any learned behavior, it can be unlearned. The process begins with something deceptively small, yet profoundly brave: honesty. Not the kind that demands a public confession, but the quiet kind, the kind that happens alone, when you finally whisper to yourself, "I'm not okay." And for the first time, you don't rush to fix it. You just let it be true. This quiet act of truth, admitting what's real, is more powerful than it looks. It interrupts the cycle. It breaks the illusion that emotional masking is who you are. Because the moment you allow yourself to feel what you've been avoiding, something subtle but profound happens. Your body exhales. Your mind softens, and for the first time in a long while, you begin to reconnect with the pieces of yourself you buried just to make it through. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." It's a reminder that pain doesn't vanish when ignored. It simply retreats deeper, where it begins to steer your choices, your moods, your relationships, all from the shadows. But the moment you stop resisting, the moment you face it, healing begins to take shape, quietly, honestly, and from the inside out. That's why people who pretend to be okay often struggle with true connection. They long for closeness, but the very thing they crave is also what they fear most: vulnerability. Because to be vulnerable means taking off the mask, and the mask has been their safety for so long. So they build relationships where they're the helper, the listener, the steady one. They become the emotional anchor for everyone else: strong, dependable, always there. But when it comes time to receive care, they freeze. Accepting help feels dangerous. Letting someone see their pain feels like exposure. And yet, beneath all that control, there's a quiet ache, a desire to be seen. Not for how well they hold it together, but for the simple, messy, beautiful truth of who they really are. It's deeply ironic. The very people who hold everyone else together are often the ones quietly falling apart. The ones praised for their resilience are the ones most in need of rest. The ones called strong are often just surviving. But we live in a world that doesn't make much room for that truth. A world that applauds endurance but misunderstands healing, where never give up is seen as wisdom, and "I need a break" sounds like failure. We're taught to push through instead of pause, to smile instead of feel, to perform instead of be. And so, millions of people walk around carrying invisible exhaustion, desperate not for more motivation, but for permission. Permission to stop pretending. Permission to simply be human. So people push forward, smiling, performing, enduring, until something inside finally gives way. And when it does, the world acts surprised. "But they seemed so put together," they say. I never would have guessed. Of course they wouldn't. Because the world only believes what you let it see. But here's the quiet truth: pretending to be okay doesn't protect you. It erases you. It turns your pain into silence and your existence into a performance. And invisibility, that constant hiding of your real self, is its own kind of ache. Because how can anyone hold you if they don't know you're falling? How can anyone love you if they've never actually seen you? There's a rare kind of courage in admitting you're not okay. It's not about giving up or drowning in sadness. It's about finally telling yourself the truth. Because pretending takes energy, but honesty creates space. When you stop performing, you start breathing again. You don't have to hold yourself together just to be acceptable. You don't have to wear resilience like armor. You get to just be messy, uncertain, alive. That's what real strength looks like. Not endurance, not perfection, but the quiet, steady decision to stop hiding and start being human. Still, the shift isn't simple. After years of hiding behind a mask, authenticity can feel like exposure: raw, uncertain, even risky. It's like stepping into the open air after living underground. The cold bites at first, but with time, the truth starts to feel like warmth, like safety, like home. Maybe that's what healing really is: not chasing happiness, not performing strength, but finding peace in your own imperfection. The kind of peace that says, "I don't have to pretend anymore." Because when you stop faking fine, you don't just rediscover yourself, you give others permission to do the same. And in that shared honesty, that quiet meeting of truth and tenderness, real connection and real healing finally begin. When you spend too long pretending, life slowly splits in two: the version you perform and the one you quietly survive. At first, You can manage both. You tell yourself it's balance. You hold conversations, do your job, smile when you're supposed to. But inside, there's another world unspoken, heavy, real. Eventually, the gap between those two selves widens until you can't tell which one is truly you. Psychologists call this emotional dissonance, the inner tension of acting fine while silently falling apart. It's like laughing with a fractured heart. And the longer it goes on, the duller everything becomes. Not because you've stopped caring, but because caring feels too dangerous. Pretending offers control. When everything around you feels uncertain, the mask becomes safety. You can navigate chaos without exposing your fear. You can speak without being seen. But it always comes with a cost, the quiet loss of authenticity, the slow fading of your own truth. The cost builds quietly, almost invisibly. Pretending to be okay might keep you safe for a while, but it slowly disconnects you from yourself. You stop trusting your emotions. You start doubting your pain. You convince yourself that if no one notices, maybe it doesn't matter. But that's the illusion. Because emotions don't disappear, they disguise themselves. Ignored long enough, they find new ways to surface. Irritability, burnout, apathy, even physical symptoms. The body refuses to lie. It becomes the voice you've been silencing through tight shoulders, tension headaches, restless sleep, a heaviness you can't name. It's your body's way of whispering, please stop pretending. Over time, even joy feels distant, muffled like hearing laughter through water. The world loses color, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've spent all your energy holding yourself together. And that's the quiet tragedy of emotional suppression. It protects you from pain, but it also numbs you to life. And yet, from the outside, they look perfectly fine, maybe even admirable. They're the reliable ones, the steady hands, the people others lean on. Their calendars are full, their smiles convincing, their composure unshaken. But inside, they're often unraveling quietly, piece by piece. The irony is cruel. The more they suppress, the more praise they receive. People call it strength, discipline, grace under pressure. But what the world applauds as resilience is often just emotional exhaustion wearing a mask. It's not that they want to lie. It's that honesty once cost them something. This is where social conditioning comes in. From early on, we're taught what's acceptable to feel. We're told to smile for the camera, to be grateful, to calm down. Sadness makes people uncomfortable. Anger makes people pull away. Vulnerability feels like a threat. So, we adapt. We swallow emotions that don't fit the script. We trade authenticity for approval. And soon, it's no longer a conscious choice, it's habit. By the time we're adults, we're fluent in the art of emotional disguise. But every mask comes with a price. Distance. The more we curate ourselves for acceptance, the further we drift from connection, not just with others, but with the truth of who we really are. Because connection demands honesty, and honesty demands risk. And for those who've been hurt before, risk feels like standing unarmored in a world that taught them to hide. So we cling to the illusion of safety. We smile through pain because at least it's familiar. We say, I'm fine, because it keeps the peace. We suppress instead of express, believing silence is safer than rejection. But every time we do, we disappear a little more. There's a quote that says, "You can't heal what you hide." And that's the truth most people spend a lifetime avoiding. The more you hide, the more you lose sight of yourself. Healing doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It begins the second you stop pretending. The moment you stop performing emotional balance just to make others comfortable. It begins when you give yourself permission to feel, even if it's messy, even if it's inconvenient, even if no one else understands. Because pretending might protect your image, but only honesty protects your soul. When you say, I'm not okay right now, something shifts. You open a door not to pity, but to compassion. You reconnect with your own humanity. Psychologically, this act of honesty is called integration. It's when the divided parts of you, the performer and the person, the mask and the truth, begin to reunite. That's when the numbness starts to fade. That's when wholeness returns. Because real strength was never about pretending. It's about having the courage to be seen, even when you're still healing. The courage it takes to smile through pain is survival, but the courage it takes to speak your pain, that's rebirth. Healing rarely begins with something dramatic. More often, it starts quietly, with a moment of truth, like replying to, "How are you?" with, "Honestly, I've been having a hard time." but I'm holding on. Like letting tears fall without rushing to hide them. Like resting, not as a reward, but as a necessity. Sometimes, healing is as small and as radical as choosing not to fake a smile when you don't feel one. There's something sacred about that kind of honesty. It strips away the performance and lets life touch you again. Joy stops feeling artificial. Sadness stops feeling endless. Both become real. Both become human. And in that space of truth, connection slowly rebuilds not with your mask, but with your soul. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop pretending to be okay, the right people don't leave. They finally see you. They begin to remember the parts that were silenced. The curious child, the dreamer, the one who laughed without self-consciousness. At first, it feels unfamiliar, almost fragile, like meeting an old friend after years apart. But that's the quiet miracle of authenticity. The more real you become, the more alive you feel. You start noticing small joys again, the way sunlight hits your face, the comfort of a deep breath, the relief of not having to pretend. This is what healing actually looks like. Not endless positivity, but gentle remembering. Not constant strength, but honest softness. It's messy, tender, and deeply human. You don't rebuild yourself by becoming someone new. You return to who you were before the world taught you to hide. And when that happens, you realize something simple yet life-changing. Being real was never the risk. It was always the way home. They've made peace with their shadows instead of running from them. They've cried in silence, rebuilt themselves in pieces, and learned that authenticity is the only kind of beauty that lasts. There's a calmness in their presence, not because life stopped being hard, but because they stopped fighting themselves. These people don't need to prove anything. They don't chase validation. They radiate truth. Their strength isn't loud. It's grounded, the kind that comes from knowing who they are, even when the world forgets. They don't wear masks anymore, because they've realized that love, real love, only finds you when you're real. And maybe that's the quiet ending we all deserve. Not a perfect life, but an honest one. A life where you can breathe without pretending, feel without apologizing, and exist without performance. A life where peace isn't something you chase, it's something you return to. They've stopped demanding perfection from themselves and started allowing space for grace. And that shift, that quiet acceptance, is what makes them glow differently. They no longer chase happiness like a prize to be won. They create it gently, in small, honest moments. So if you've been pretending to be okay, take this as your permission slip to stop. You don't have to earn your right to rest. You don't have to keep performing strength to be worthy of love. You don't have to hide your trembling hands or your tired heart. You're allowed to fall apart. You're allowed to pause. You're allowed to tell the truth even if your voice shakes when you do, because truth is where the healing begins. And when you finally show up as your full, unedited self, something beautiful happens. Life meets you there. The people meant for you will recognize you, not the mask, and peace, the real kind, will begin to find its way back. Maybe the point was never to be endlessly okay. Maybe it was to remember that being human means being everything soft and strong, broken and becoming, tired and still trying. Pretending keeps you safe, but honesty sets you free. And the moment you choose real over perfect, you don't just exist anymore, you finally begin to live.